most policyholders are going with a $2,500 all other perils deductible in Florida, or that basically for water damage as a $2,500 deductible. Most water heaters are under $1,500 installed. So if you do have a leak, whether the severity of it, whether it's high, low, whatever it may be, you're looking at $2,500 minimum out of pocket if you have damage. If it's bad, I've seen horrible ones. People were gone for a couple hours out of their house and it's a $100,000 loss. You can be out of your house for months. For $1,500, you could have nipped it in the bud and it would have been a non-issue.
If you can't write a contract on the back of your car on a Saturday night, then you don't know enough. All you have to do is show up. Just show up and you can succeed. Let's get to the point.
What we want to talk about today is insurance items that, with regard to insurance, that interfere with a real estate transaction, or having, like, we'll start with the biggest subject, I guess you and I talked a little bit before, which was roofs. Mm-hmm. Is it roofs or roofs?
That's a good question. It's a good way.
Okay. So, all right.
We usually deal with them in a singular basis.
Roof. Okay.
But yes, it's that is obviously a very hot button issue right now with a lot of carriers.
So in the state of Florida, let's go. We have situations are occurring. A real estate transaction takes place. A property is sold, and suddenly an insurance company comes in, does some inspection, visual, and drops people's insurance. Yeah,
so it's always been the case, but every carrier has an option to do what they call a post-bind inspection. So, you go through the process, you get the wind mitt, you get the 4-point, get all that, and a lot of times that's good and everything looks good, and we do a little bit of, call it self-underwriting with the agent. Anything that jumps out at us, we'll kind of try to point that out and say, hey, this may need to be addressed, or this does need to be addressed prior to. But then getting at that roof or something else, the carrier can come out and do that post bind. And if they see something that they don't like, if there's granular loss, there's lifting, curling, whatever in those shingles, or, rust on a metal roof, they can always say, hey, this needs to be addressed, or we're off the policy. In most cases, you're going to get a 25 to 30-day notice on that. Again, as an agent, we try to do the best we can on that and say, hey, maybe your shingle roof is 14 years old or 13 years old. I try to tell clients, I say, while the inspections are good, this does meet the guidelines. You may, you always have that issue that could pop up. The buyer needs to be aware that, there could be a potential to replace sooner rather than later.
So let's go back to, what are the stipulations? When you buy shingles, they're 30-year or whatever they are. Tell us how the insurance companies look at that.
A lot of times those life expectancies are a way to sell a roof or to sell a shingle, or whatever type of roof they're putting on it. A lot of those life expectancies are in perfect conditions, or maybe they're taken from studies done in Las Vegas, where you've got very, consistent weather, not a lot of rain. Florida, it rains every day in the summertime. We get this time of year especially, or a little bit earlier, a couple weeks ago, it could be in the 40s in the morning and 80s in the afternoon. You get a lot of rapid, heating and cooling, expanding, contracting. Those shingles take a lot of abuse. So just because they say that life expectancy could be 30 to 40 years, it doesn't mean that they're going to last that long. And these carriers have their own data. They've got hundreds of thousands, not millions of data points for these life expectancies, or what they've seen historically with claims. And they've determined that on a 3-tab or that peel and stick that you don't really see much anymore, 10 years, you may start seeing some issues with that. 15 on that architectural or 3-dimensional. At that 15-year mark, they start seeing these issues where regular afternoon thunderstorm rolls through and you get some leaking. It doesn't take a hurricane necessarily. So obviously if a hurricane does come through, then, chances for damage are greatly increased. It's just the weather in Florida and the climate here is just not conducive to longevity of any kind of building material or anything in general. Salt water living on the coast, even with metal roofs, it'll eat at that. You see it with breaker boxes. on those beachfront homes, that salt spray just eats away at them. So where you can see a house in inland that, 1960 build, that breaker box looks brand new. On the coast, 10 years in, it's got rust all over it. So, it's.
Okay. So how does it work? Like, so you list a property to sell, a buyer buys it, new owner. In the past, you could even assume the insurance from the previous person, right?
Only with flood.
Only with flood.
So
okay.
flood, and that's still possible. There's been some changes to that too, which we can get into, but flood is really the only one that doesn't really take into consideration the rating of the individual that's buying the home. Flood just it's for one peril only, and it rates based on your elevation essentially and some building characteristics, but they're looking at elevation to that base flood area or that base flood elevation that you're in.
Gotcha.
And those were NFIP policies or FEMA or that National Flood Insurance Program. Okay. Those are the ones that are, and they still are assumable.
Right.
It's not so much needed anymore because of some of those changes that have gone on. They've got away from the grandfathering, and that's what was.
Yeah, I got you. So if you're buying a property, you need to do what? Call your insurance company and get them to look at?
Yeah. I mean, if you're buying a property, especially an older property, you need to make sure that you've got inspections, up-to-date inspections, current inspections, wind mitt and 4-point specifically. Those are just a universal language, if you will, that these carriers use. The wind mitt is not a necessity. It's more of a credit based. So the wind mitt is where you can see some reduction in your rate. It's not a requirement necessarily for a carrier. The 4-point is where they can typically require, and that's what's going to show them why they call it a 4-point, the 4 main systems of the house: HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and roof.
Thank you for describing that.
Yeah. So that's why the 4-point is there, and that's what they're looking at. They're looking at any plumbing deficiencies, electrical issues, HVAC, make sure that's running in good operation. We've got mold issues in Florida. I want to make sure that's operational. And then obviously the roof. And the 4-point now shows the life expectancy. At least that's what the inspector puts on there. And a lot of carriers are wanting to see 3 to 5 years of life left on that roof type minimum. But again, that's not, like we said, that post-bind, things can pop up.
Well, not all home inspectors are qualified to do this wind mitt or 4-point. So you've got to
they've got to have certain licensing. There's a lot of them out there now because it is such a big business. But yes, there are certain ways that the forms have to be filled out. They've got to be filled out by licensed inspectors. You can't just have your buddy who knows, a little bit about building say, oh yeah, this looks good. This looks good. It's got to be done by a certified home inspector, and they've got to sign their license to it. So, and they're looking at it. So, citizens especially, you've got to put all that information in their system when you attach those inspections.
So, if I'm looking to buy a property, and it has a 3-dimensional shingle, and that house is what did you say, 15 years old, you need to have somebody check it out?
Absolutely. A lot of carriers have shortened their underwriting guidelines where 15 is the max, and some of them are under 10. Okay. Some of them are under 5. Some of them are under 5 in building year. Just there's a lot of restrictions going on right now. And it varies from county to county. It varies from state to state even, obviously, but zip code to zip code, it can change. Okay. There's carriers in Walton County that aren't writing at all in Walton County, and they're writing some in Okaloosa and vice versa. And there's some that are writing certain zip codes in Walton, some and not writing in others. So it's the location means a lot. I mean, one another thing that carriers are doing is taking a hard look at their exposures, and they're dialing down into these zip codes and even into neighborhoods, and saying, we're overexposed in this area. We're shutting this area off. We'll still keep these open, but they're trying to balance out their books right now.
Okay.
A lot of carriers are not being aggressive with new business. They're saying they're trying to hold serve and just see what's going to come. And
Wow.
So it's a tough situation sometimes where you could be just, I know Walton County, especially, you've got Inlet Beach and the Panama City. You go further east out there in Alice, you can have a different zip code, and other carriers may be available to you versus Santa Rosa Beach. So it's or if you're going north into Freeport, it's going to vary wildly. So yes, when you're buying a new home, do some research, talk to your agent, your insurance agent, get a couple quotes, go to a couple different places,
before you close.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then have that conversation. I try to talk to as many people as I can about as much as I can. If I see something in a wind mid or a 4-point, if I don't have if I'm dealing with a realtor and they've sent me somebody, or it's warm lead, however you want to look at that, I say, hey, these things could be an issue. Can I talk to your buyer? Can we, I need to have a discussion with them. This is what we need to look at. We need to make sure that because my relationship, my relationship with that client is at least for a year, so and hopefully longer than that, but we need to be we try to set an expectation. We don't want these people buying a house and being blindsided 25 days later, having to spend $10,000, $15,000, maybe more on a roof. I mean, cost of building materials, we know that too. That's another driving factor in all of this, right? Is you get to that point and, well, now that $12,000 roof is costing me $16,000, $17,000.
Right.
And they're 4 months out.
Right.
I can't get it done. So we're trying to do the best we can as far as, preemptively catching some of that.
Okay, interesting. Now, what's the second most? Is it hot water tanks? The second thing that's causing a problem? Talk to us about the life expectancy or the years allowed on that, or however it's.
Yep. It's honestly very similar to that shingle roof. A lot of carriers, 15 years and newer, still have a few that'll do 20. Sometimes it depends on where that water heater is located. If it's in the garage, if it's inside, there's some variance there. But yeah, a tank, your standard tank water heater, again, they've got these data points that they've dealt with, hundreds of thousands, millions of claims over the years.
Right.
15 years, they tend to start having issues. Tankless, if you can go tankless, I know they're more expensive, but those tend to have a lot better life expectancy, and carriers aren't as picky on that. As long as it's in good working order, most of the time you're okay there.
Okay.
It's the tank ones, because those are the ones that store water. They're the ones that when they leak, or they do something crazy, and
makes sense.
So the other way I look at this, and this is what I tell clients, most agents or most policyholders are going with a $2,500 all other perils deductible in Florida, or that basically for water damage as a $2,500 deductible. Most water heaters are under $1,500 installed. So if you do have a leak, whether the severity of it, whether it's high, low, whatever it may be, you're looking at $2,500 minimum out of pocket if you have damage. If it's bad, I've seen horrible ones. People were gone for a couple hours out of their house and it's a $100,000 loss. You can be out of your house for months. In the Destin area or any of these rental areas, try finding a house in the summertime to rent, during that time. Plus you're out of your home. Plus it's just a hassle. For $1,500, you could have nipped it in the bud and it would have been a non-issue. So you're taking, preventative measures to honestly save yourself $1,000. I mean, you're at a $2,500 deductible, you're still $1,000 in the positive, right? Even if it doesn't meet your deductible and just leaks a little bit, you're still having to, foot the bill up to that amount. So I use it, as a selling point like that. I've had people, well, mine's good. I've been at it for 30 years. It happens.
Yeah.
It's a different scenario. You got twice as much out of it. Go ahead. Let's $1,500. Let's save ourselves the headache down the road.
Yeah. I lived in Texas. I think I had an 80-gallon hot water tank in the attic.
Yeah.
Up in the very tank. I don't think you could get them out.
Yeah.
Other than replace them. Imagine the potential damage there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
These 2-story houses, they're doing that too. I mean, you got your air handler in the attic. You got all kinds of stuff. Water's everywhere. The one thing we know is water's going to find a way out. You put it in a confined space, it's going to figure its way out.
All right.
So
All right, that's good information. Okay, next, what other problems do we have? Wiring?
A little bit. The wiring is on the older properties still. The big thing we see is it's really usually small. It's like a double tap in the breaker box, which usually just install a new breaker and you're good to go, where they wire two things to the same breaker. It's usually that's the biggest thing we see. Now, on occasion, some of these older homes that, there's cloth wiring that can pop up, and aluminum wiring. Aluminum wiring we see a lot more than cloth.
We had a home inspector in here, and he said something about something new homes, cheaper, maybe aluminum coated wiring.
I haven't.
I forgot.
Yeah,
I haven't exactly what he said.
I haven't run into that in our area yet. But this is how everything starts, right?
All
so
right.
Back to the plumbing issue with polybutylene plumbing. That's a hot button issue when you've got those polybutylene pipes. Well, that was back in the early 80s in our area. Destin was full of it.
Right.
They still, most of those homes have been updated since because of the issues with insurance. But they thought that was going to be the next greatest thing. Doesn't leak. And then found out that it leaks more than the regular stuff. So again, it's just anything. There's always the push to make changes and find something newer and better and cheaper to manufacture. But as long as it's the code, in a newer construction home, I haven't seen any kind of guideline restriction on aluminum coated.
Yeah, I don't think there are any. In fact, that's what he said. It was approved for now.
Yeah, until that, first issue.
All right.
But yeah, the aluminum wiring, there's a few carriers that will still take that if it's multi-strand versus single strand. There's two different kinds. A lot of times will have to have what's called Alumicons installed at each breaker or each outlet and termination point. So you got to be cautious there. Those things really jump out at us in a 4-point. We don't see a whole lot of it, thankfully, in our area. But when you get into some of the older sections of Destin or even into Fort Walton, you definitely can run into that stuff still. Again, those are the bigger issues we're seeing are the water heaters and the roofs right now.
Okay. And I have heard also the new plumbing they have that's blue and red. I don't know the name of that.
PEX.
Okay.
So I think that's what you're referring
to.
So new PEX is fine. We do see that called out in 4 points a lot. A lot of carriers have said no to PEX if it's the old PEX.
How do you tell the difference?
That's where that 4-point comes into play. That inspector needs to make sure that if they put PEX on there, they need to say PEX installed for new water heater replacement or whatever it was. There should be a date. Hopefully they can say this is the new stuff. You can tell, an inspector can tell by looking at it whether it's new PEX versus old PEX.
Oh, I see.
Again, we don't run into a lot of the old PEX stuff and too much anymore, but we are seeing a lot of the new stuff.
Anything else that's causing insurability issues?
Insurability issues is just guidelines in general and carrier issues. I know we've had our conversations about that, and we can go into a lot of that, but just rundown on it is markets are dwindling almost by the day. We've had multiple carriers go under in the last year, more than I've ever heard of. We've got a few that could be looking at it again. Some bigger names out there potentially. We're praying that's not the case, but we got to be cognizant of it because there's a lot of stress on the insurance market in general. My own personal kind of opinion, I know in our area specifically, the MLS, there's not a lot of inventory on the MLS, and the stuff that is there, again, my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with insurability. I think how hot this market is, if there's a market for it, that home's going off, is selling. The stuff that's sitting there, it's either grossly overpriced or something crazy, but a lot of times it has to do with an insurability issue.
Okay.
It would be, again, just my opinion on that, but right. I do think some of that is causing some issues there.
All right. So you gave us some information. It was really good. What should someone do? I'm a buyer, or I'm an agent representing a buyer. how do I help my client get them in touch with you, right?
Yeah. Get them in touch with an agent and get them talking. Get the lines of communications open early.
Okay.
Again, new construction, which we have a lot of in our area, not really any issues. But yes, especially on that older stuff, the 4-point wind mitt, the earlier you can get that done, the better. Because that just anymore, I'll tell anybody that comes to me, whether it's an agent or a buyer, whatever it is, if it's an older home, over 20 years old really anymore, if it's over 20 years old, I need those inspections. The wind mitt is just going to help you in most cases. That's just a rate thing. But that 4-point is what I really need to take a look at what we've got.
Okay.
Otherwise, I've said this many times, I'm throwing darts blindfolded in the dark. There's a ton of things that can pop up.
Okay.
And you just never know. And so that 4 points, that universal language that we all in the insurance world kind of speak, it gives us a rough idea, a really good idea of what we're looking at. So the earlier we can get that done, the more complete that information is.
Okay.
That's the best thing to do.
And then the flood you touched on, you said the last time we talked, which was not on camera, you talked about changes in the flood program. Can we touch on that real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll kind of give you a brief overview, but October 1 of 2021, NFIP, FEMA completely revamped their rating platform, if you will. They did away with grandfathering. They've made some rate adjustments. They're looking at properties on an individual basis. There's no more of just that flat preferred rate where it was, $400, $500, $600, $700.
Because you were in a zone,
because
you
were in that preferred zone. This was your rate. That's not the case anymore. You're in that preferred zone. Your rate theoretically is going to be better,
right?
But it's not a one size fits all anymore. They're looking at these properties on an individual basis.
Elevation.
Yeah, elevation is the key
of the property, of the home.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Elevation is the key. They're going to look at the elevations around you. Their mapping has gotten better, technology's gotten better, but they're also going to look at the elevation of the home. So anytime that elevation certificate's available in those higher risk zones, usually a benefit, unless you're below that base flood, some of the older properties, those zones can change over the years, and now that grandfathering's gone, right? When they built that house, it was fine at that whatever zone that was.
Right.
Well, you were grandfathered into that rate at that lower elevation or that lower premium. That's gone now.
Wow.
Now everyone's subject to the new rates. They've tried to get rid of this grandfathering provision a couple times before, and it's been met with a lot of pushback, but it seems to be taking this time.
So these LOMA letters, I don't remember what LOMA, LOMA.
Letter of Map Amendment.
Okay, there you go. So what is that still applicable if you have a letter?
It still is. In a lot of cases, though, if you get say you're in an A zone, which is a higher risk zone, and you do the process of going through the LOMA, you get your LOMA approved, and now you're in that preferred zone, or they say, okay, yeah, you're based on your elevation surrounding issues and all that, you're now in an X. All that's done is now a lender's not going to require that you purchase it. Doesn't mean that
the lender's not going to require that you purchase flood insurance.
That's all that has done.
Okay.
That helps more so in the coastal barrier resource areas, which we have a lot of in Destin. And we can get into that another time.
I'm sure that's way too much to cover like this.
But it helps those buyers that may be looking at, in those particular areas, looking at $6,000 to $10,000 flood insurance rate. Well, now they can just say, we're going to self-insure. A lender's not going to make me buy it, because I've got this letter of map amendment. So there's still applicable situations for that. But as far as the rates, we've definitely seen a rate jump, especially on coastal properties in FEMA and NFIP. A lot of them are going up. It's made the private market more attractive, I think, to a lot of buyers or to a lot of insureds. A lot of times you can get more bang for your buck out of that private policy. We sell a lot more private insurance now than we do.
Private versus citizens? Is that
private versus NFIP or the National Flood Insurance Program,
okay.
FEMA, that federal program that's available. But private, we're just it's an individual insurer coming in, like typically like a Lloyd's of London or, someone like that in a surplus line situation coming in and saying, we're going to give you, instead of that $250,000 max that NFIP offers you on your home, we're going to give you $500, the full, whatever you're insuring the house for to rebuild it. They'll give you replacement costs on contents. They'll give you some carriers will get loss of use, which you don't get with NFIP. And a lot of times the rate's the same or better than what NFIP is. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with the NFIP.
All right.
It's I have my own opinions on that, and I.
Okay. Well, Florida's going into a special session, I think, with regard to insurance. So I'm going to kind of date this podcast somewhat with that.
Yep.
So, Brad, if this is a lot, and it's obvious people need to get in touch with someone knowledgeable like yourself, how does that happen? How do we get you?
Our office specifically, or me specifically. I mean,
You can give us your contact info, your website.
Sure. So our website is destininsuranceagent.com. We write all over Florida. We're also licensed in Alabama and Georgia. So we can do pretty much anything across those three. If you want to reach us, our phone number is 850-460-7490. And general email is just admin@lmigflorida, all spelled out, .com. So Lima, Mike, Indigo, Golf, FLORIDA.com.
All right. And call and ask for Brad. He'll take care of you. You can tell.
We'll do our best, and a lot of times we're trying to look out for you as best we can and do a little bit of that pre-underwriting so we don't get in that situation like you were mentioning with, I bought a house and now I got to replace a roof or do something.
Oh, and I didn't mention Brad is a Gator fanatic. He graduated from
Absolutely University of Florida.
He's got a helmet in his office and things signed. So,
yep. I was there during the glory years. So it was a good time to be a Gator. We're on the comeback trail though. So
I see.
Do you want me to yell?
Yeah, no, you don't have to. It's like she monitors all this the whole time and deals with it, so you don't have to yell or nothing like that.
I think my hardest part is going to be sitting still, talk with my hands. And not leaning back.
Yeah, you can't click.
Yeah,
you can't do none of this. Or she hears it, and then it'll stop doing that.